I expect 500 subs. Surely life must exist on it? We dreamt of the builders of the canals that we could see by telescope, about ruined cities, lost Martian civilizations, the possibilities of alien contact. Then the Viking and Mariner probes went up and sent back fucking nothing. Mars was a barren planet. Sterile, lifeless, uninhabited. Time to blow that shit up. In 2019, the first man set foot on the surface of Mars. John Boone, American hero. And then in 2027, 100 of the Earth's finest engineers and scientists, and one psychologist, made the first mass landing, their mission to create a new world out of this useless rock. And that is where we are now. Almost finished. John Boone got assassinated, as they do. And this section is currently narrated of multiple narrators. This one is narrated by Frank Chalmers. John Boone's best friend / assassin. Well, technically, he got someone else to do it for him, and then he poisoned that guy. Wait, so that actually makes it... Yeah, / assassin. And I think we're ready. The elevator car. I don't remember what happened last week. You didn't do your reading pee yet? Yeah, but I already peed, and the stream is... I haven't even been streaming for an hour yet, so... I did take a break before I started, but I didn't pee during it. That's true. As far as you know. The elevator car was like an old Amsterdam house. I don't know what that means. Narrow and tall. With a light-filled room at the top. In this case, a clear-walled and domed chamber that reminded Frank of the bubble dome of the Ares. The sexy sex dome of the Ares. Also where Hiroko grew her mushrooms. On the second day of the trip, he joined the car's other passengers. Only 20 on this one. There weren't too many people going this way. And they took the car's own little interior elevator up the 30 stories to this clear penthouse. I have no idea what they're doing or why they're here. What happened? I know Frank has been fucking off in the desert with the Arabs for 2 years, and then he came back because he realized that he wasn't in control of Martian politics anymore. Oh, that's basically it. People are mass emigrating to Mars. Frank had to come back because he's like, what the fuck? I thought, I could just fuck off to the desert for 2 years. It's the year 2057 now. And why are people getting assaulted in the tents? Why are they paying for protection? Where are you when all of this is happening? It's not our jurisdiction, the man said, tight-lipped. White-lipped. I just summarized what happened last week. Okay, Frank returns to Burroughs to find that Unoma capitulated to the transnationals. Goddamn, dude. You did good on this one. Frank returns to Burroughs to find that UNOMA, the United Nations Organization of Martian Affairs, capitulated to the transnationals. Maya is in Burroughs, but still mad at Frank. Frank looks for her in the dining commons, but sees her laughing with another guy, and then that was hilarious. Oh my god. And then Frank moves to Pavonis Mons and tours the elevator base. Oh yeah, so all these people. If you have not been paying attention, I do not know how to summarize this for you. Okay, so if you've not been paying attention, they built a space elevator. And this space elevator is pretty much a string. If a 35,000 kilometer, 30 meter wide tunnel could be called a string, this string is attached to an asteroid that was captured and mined in orbit to create the string. And then this string is an elevator that goes almost all the way to the surface of Mars, and then it's locked in place to the asteroid elevator, and then it hovers above a fixed location, which is on Pavonis Mons. It hovers in like a dock without touching anything. And then they can put like mining equipment and not mining equipment. Like they can send like resources and people up and down the space elevator. So then Frank sees Maya laughing with another guy, and Frank moves to Pavonis Mons and tours the elevator base. Frank hears people's complaints about the ineffective and corrupt security forces, also the problems of mass migration. And Frank talks to striking workers, gets them to end the strike, and adopt a different strategy. Frank realizes that he needs to go talk to Phyllis. Thank you so much for that summary, Purple Wayne. So, oh my god, we haven't seen Phyllis since the Ares, basically. Or she was on a committee for the space elevator as well. Also, Phyllis is a bitch. I feel like Phyllis, her name should actually be Karen. But I don't want to taint your view of things, whatever. Let's just go. It's not our jurisdiction, the man said, white-lipped. Oh, come on. What is your jurisdiction? Your pocket is your only jurisdiction. He went on until they got up and left the car, as angry at him as he was at them, but too disciplined or scared to talk back. In the Sheffield offices, he strode from room to room, shouting at the staff and making calls. Sachs, Vlad, Janet. He told them what was happening, and they all eventually offered the same suggestion, which he had to admit was a good one. He would have to go up the elevator and talk to Phyllis. See if you can manage the reservations, he said to his staff. The elevator car was like an old Amsterdam house, narrow and tall, with a light-filled room at the top. In this case, a clear-walled and domed chamber that reminded Frank of the bubble dome on the Ares. On the second day of the trip, he joined the car's other passengers. Only 20 on this one. There weren't too many people going this way. And they took the car's own little interior elevator up the 30 stories to this clear penthouse to see Phobos pass. The outer perimeter of the room was set out over the elevator proper, so that there was a view down as well. Frank gazed down at the curved line of the planet's horizon, much wider and thicker than the last time he had seen it. Atmosphere at 150 millibars now. Really quite impressive, even if it was composed of poison gas. While they were waiting for the little moon's appearance, Frank stared at the planet below. Happy Halloween, pumpkin cakes. Thank you for reminding me to mute my alerts. But thank you for 1010. Happy Halloween. Says to the cop, "Is that your jurisdiction in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?" Is that a jurisdiction in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? Thank you for that. While they were waiting for the little moon's appearance, Frank stared at the planet below. Oh my god, I already read this. Or wait, no, I didn't. It was really quite impressive, even if it was composed of poison gas. While they were waiting for the little moon's appearance, Frank stared at the planet below. The gossamer arrow of the cable pointed straight at it. It looked like they were rising on a tall, slender rocket. A strange, attenuated rocket which stretched some kilometers above and below them. That was all they would ever see of the cable. And below them, the round orange floor of Mars looked just as blank as it had on their first approach so long ago. Unchanged, despite all their meddling. One only had to get far enough away. Then one of the elevator pilots pointed out Phobos, a dim white object to the west. In 10 minutes, it was upon them, flashing past with astonishing speed. A large gray potato, hurtling faster than the head could turn. Zip, gone. The observers in the penthouse hooted, exclaimed, chattered. Frank had caught only the merest glimpse of the dome on Stickney, winking like a gem on the rock. There had been a piece banding the middle like a wedding ring, and some bright silver lumps. That was all he could recall of the blurred image. 50 kilometers away, when it had passed, the pilot said. At 7,000 kilometers an hour. Not all that fast, really. There were meteors that hit the planet at 50,000 kilometers an hour. But fast enough. Frank went back down to the dining floor, trying to fix the hurtling image in his mind. Phobos. People at the dining table next to him talked of shoving it up into a braided orbit with Deimos. It was out of the loop now. A new Azores. Phobos. People at the dining table next to him talked of shoving it up into a braided orbit with Deimos. It was out of the loop now. A new Azores. I don't know what this word is. A new Azores. Nothing but an inconvenience to the cable. And Phyllis had argued all along that Mars itself would have suffered the same fate in the solar system at large, unless the elevator were built to climb its gravity well. They would have been bypassed by miners going to the metal-rich asteroids, which had no gravity wells to contend with. And then there were the moons of Jupiter, Saturn, the outer planets. But there was no danger of that now. Yeah, so anyways, lest you think this is silly sci-fi, they had to build a space elevator, okay? Because why the fuck are we going to Mars if we can't send stuff up a straw? I hate everybody. Fuck chat. Why are vampires terrible artists? They can only draw blood. Thank you. Is this where someone says space elevators aren't feasible? No. Going to Mars is not feasible, but don't tell Elon Musk. Let him get trapped there. But there was no danger of that now. On the 5th day, they approached Clark and slowed down. It had been an asteroid about 2 kilometers across, a carbonaceous hunk, now shaped to a cube. With every centimeter of its Mars-facing surface graded and covered with concrete, steel, or glass. The cable plunged right into the center of this assemblage. There were holes on both sides of the joint where the cable met Moon, just big enough to allow passage to the elevator cars. They slid up into one of these holes and came to a smooth stop. The interior space they slid into was a vertical subway station. The passengers got out and went their ways into the tunnels of Clark. One of Phyllis's assistants met him and drove him in a little car through the warren of rock-walled tunnels. They came to Phyllis's offices, which were rooms on the planet's side of the moon, walled with mirrors and green bamboo. You bitch. Just like Arkady and Nadia gave you that idea. Anyways, walled with mirrors and green bamboo. Though they were in microgravity and pulling themselves around, they stood on a consensus floor, as established by the furniture. Ripping around in Velcro shoes. A rather conservative practice, but to be expected in such an earth-regarding place. Frank exchanged his shoes for some Velcro slippers by the door and followed suit. Phyllis was just finishing talking to a couple of men. Not only a cheap and clean lift out of the gravity well, but a propulsion system for slinging loads all over the solar system. It's an extraordinarily elegant piece of engineering, don't you think? Yes, the men replied. She looked about 50 years old. After fulsome introductions, the men were from Amex. The others left. When Phyllis and Frank were the only ones left in the room, Frank said to her, "You'd better stop using this extraordinarily elegant piece of engineering to flood Mars with emigrants, or it'll blow up in your face, and you're gonna lose your anchoring point." Oh, Frank, she laughed. She really had aged well. Hair silver, face handsomely lined and taut, figure trim, neat as a pin in a rust jumpsuit and lots of gold jewelry, which together with her silver hair gave her an overall metallic sheen. She even looked at Frank through gold wire rimmed glasses, an affectation that distanced her from the room, as if she were focusing on flat video images on the insides of her spectacles. Phyllis wasn't the streamer. That was like Janice or something. Phyllis is the one who believes in manifest destiny and thinks that Jesus is blessing their Mars trip. And that there's much money to be earned. And we don't need none of these silly socialist scientific ideas. Socialist/scientific, lest the fucking imbeciles in chat are like, oh, I don't see what's wrong with that. Not just the socialist, she was also like, we should just blow up these rocks, like we're gonna make this project as big as we can. It's manifest destiny, man. Which I know some of you are still gonna be like, fuck yeah, but I just wanted to make the distinction. Called it. She looked at Frank through gold wire rimmed glasses, an affectation that distanced her from the room, as if she were focusing on flat video images on the insides of her spectacles. You can't send down so many so fast, he insisted. There's no infrastructure for them, physically or culturally. What's developing are the worst kind of wildcat settlements, like refugee camps or forced labor camps. And it'll get reported like that back home. You know how they always use analogies to Terran situations. And that's bound to hurt you. She stared at a spot about 3 feet in front of him. Most people don't see it that way, she proclaimed, as if the room were full of listeners. This is just a step on the path to full human use of Mars. It's here for us, and we're going to use it. Earth is desperately crowded, and the mortality rate is still dropping. Science and faith will continue to create new opportunities as they always have. These first pioneers may suffer some hardships, but those won't last long. We lived worse than they do when we first arrived. Startled at this lie, Frank glared at her, but she did not back down. Scornfully, he said, "You're not paying attention." But the thought frightened him, and he paused. He brought himself back under control, stared through the clear floor at the planet. Dude, I fucking love the idea of chuds who are actually listening to this book, even though I know they're probably not, but whatever. Chuds listening to this... Chuds listening to this book and trying to... Now, look, your 2 favorite characters are arguing. What are you gonna do? Trying to decide if they agree with Phyllis or Frank. Frank thinks Phyllis is an idiot. What are you gonna do? Wait, he hates immigrants. Wait, she wants to mine the planet. She wants to strip mine, manifest destiny, and he says no more immigrants. Who do you agree with? That's a pretty easy choice. Listen to the man. I'm enjoying it. I am too. But the thought frightened him, and he paused. He brought himself back under control, stared through the clear floor at the planet. As they were rotating with it, they always looked down on Tharsis. Of course. And from this high, it looked like one of the old photographs. The orange ball with all the familiar markings of its most famous hemisphere. The great volcanoes, Noctis, the canyons, the chaos, all unblemished. When was the last time you went down? He asked her. LS-60. I go down regularly, she smiled. Where do you stay when you descend? In Unoma dorms, where she worked busily to break the UN treaty. But that was her job. That was what Unoma had assigned her to do. Elevator manager, and also the primary liaison with the mining concerns. When she quit the UN, she could take all the jobs that she could handle from them. Queen of the elevator, which was now the bridge for the greater part of the Martian economy. She'd have at her disposal all the capital of whatever transnationals she chose to associate with. And all this showed, of course, in the way she ripped around the brilliant glassine room, in the way she smiled at all his withering remarks. Well, she always had been a little stupid. Frank gritted his teeth. Apparently, it was time to start using the good old USA like a sledgehammer, to see if it had any heft remaining to it. Most of the transnationals have giant holdings in the States, he said. If the American government decided to freeze their assets because they're breaking the treaty, it would slow down all of them and break some. You could never do that, Phyllis said. It would bankrupt the government. That's like threatening a dead man with a hanging. A couple more zeros on the figure are just one more level of unreality. No one can really imagine it anymore. The only ones who'd even think they can are exactly your transnational executives. They hold the debt, but no one else cares about their money. I could convince Washington of this in a minute, and when you see how it blows up in your face, and then you see how it blows up in your face. Whichever way it does, it wrecks your game. He waved a hand angrily. At which point, someone else will occupy these rooms. And, a sudden intuition, you'll be back in Underhill. That got her attention. No doubt about it. Her easy contempt suddenly took on... her easy contempt took on a sudden edge. No single person can convince Washington of anything. It's quicksand down there. You'll have your way and I'll have mine. And we'll see who has more influence. And she ripped across the room and opened the door. And loudly welcomed a gang of UN officials. Also, a waste of time. He wasn't surprised. Unlike those who had advised him to come, he had had no faith in the idea of Phyllis being rational. As with many religious fundamentalists, business for her was part of the religion. The two dogmas were mutually reinforcing, part of the same system. Reason had nothing to do with it. And while she might still believe in America's power, she certainly didn't believe in Frank's ability to wield it. Fair enough. He would prove her wrong. On the trip back down the cable, he scheduled video appointments on the half hour for 15 hours a day. His messages to Washington quickly got him into complex transmission delayed response. Oh my God. He scheduled video appointments on the half hour for 15 hours a day. His messages to Washington quickly got him into complex transmission delayed conversations with his people in the State and Commerce departments and with various cabinet heads who mattered. Soon, the new president would give him a meeting as well. Meanwhile, message after message, back and forth, leapfrogging around in the various arguments, replying to whichever correspondent got back to him first. It was complicated, exhausting. The case down on Earth had to be built like a house of cards. And a lot of them were bent. Near the end, with the cable visible all the way down into the Sheffield socket, he suddenly felt really odd. It was a physical wave that passed through him. The sensation passed, and after a bit of thought, he decided it must have been that the decelerating car had passed momentarily through 1G. An image came to him. Running along a long pier. Wet, uneven boards splashed with silverfish scales. He could even smell the saltfish stink. 1G. Funny how the body remembered it. Once resettled in Sheffield, he went back to the continuous round of recording messages and analyzing the incoming replies, dealing with old cronies and with upcoming powers. All the talk patched together into a crazy quilt of arguments proceeding at different rates. At one point, late in the northern autumn, he was engaged in about 50 conferences simultaneously. It was like those people who play chess blind, with a room full of opponents. 3 weeks of this, however, and it began to come around. Basically, because President Incaviglia himself was extremely interested in getting any leverage he could over Amex and Mitsubishi and Armscor. He was more than willing to leak to the media his intent to look into allegations of treaty violations. He did that. And stocks fell sharply in the relevant quarters. And 2 days later, the Elevator Consortium announced that enthusiasm for Martian opportunities had been so great that demand had exceeded supply for the time being. They would raise prices, of course, as their creed required. But also, they would have to slow down on emigration temporarily until more towns and robotic town builders had been constructed. Frank first heard of this on a Bar TV news report. On a Bar TV news report. One evening in a cafe over his solitary dinner. He grinned wolfishly as he chewed. So we see who's better at wrestling in quicksand, you bitch. He finished eating and went for a walk along the rim concourse. It was only one battle. He knew. And it was going to be a bitter, long war. But still, it was nice. Okay, I think that's all the geopolitics I can handle for the evening. And I also don't know when I'm going to be able to read next. But, you know, we're just going to really savor the last few chapters. Thank you for listening.